Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want thoughtful, human-centered stories told with care and respect. Your support helps this channel continue exploring real lives beyond the headlines. What you're about to hear is not an accusation or a verdict, but a careful retelling of a very complex situation, shaped by public records, online reactions, and emotional realities that only those involved can truly understand. For most of their lives, Ubby and Brittany Hensel learned how to move through a world that noticed them before it listened to them. Everywhere they went, eyes followed. Questions came before kindness. Assumptions arrived before understanding. Growing up conjoined meant they had to develop resilience early, not just physically, but emotionally. They learned how to protect their inner world while navigating a public one, building a private sense of normalcy that few outsiders could truly grasp. By adulthood, they had mastered the art of quiet strength, choosing careers in teaching, choosing routine, choosing stability over spectacle. Their lives were not about shock value, despite how often the world tried to reduce them to one. When Abby fell in love, it wasn't a fatal announced to the world. It was something softer, more careful, and deeply personal. Love for her came with added layers of responsibility, not just to herself but to Brittany, who shared every moment, every space, every decision. Romance was never just about two people. It was about trust, balance, and safety. So when Josh Bowling entered their lives, he didn't just meet Ubby. He met a bond that had existed since birth, one that could not be separated or ignored. At first, Josh seemed different from others they had encountered. He didn't stare. He didn't ask insensitive questions. He spoke to Ubby and Brittany as individuals, acknowledging their shared life without turning it into a spectacle. That alone made him stand out. He had a background that suggested discipline and service, an Army veteran with experience in nursing, someone who appeared grounded and compassionate. For women who had spent their lives being objectified or misunderstood, that sense of being seen as human felt rare and comforting. Trust, slowly and cautiously, began to form. But trust, especially for people who have learned to guard themselves, is never blind. Over time, small moments began to feel slightly off. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be easily pointed to and explained, just a collection of subtle discomforts. Lingering looks that lasted a second too long. Comments about their uniqueness that felt less like admiration and more like fascination. Moments where Brittany felt uneasy but couldn't fully articulate why. Ubby, wanting to believe in love, often tried to interpret those moments generously. Brittany, more cautious by nature, quietly took note. The difficulty wasn't identifying one clear problem. It was the pattern. Josh seemed increasingly interested in documenting their lives, wanting photos and videos of moments they preferred to keep private. At first, it could be explained as pride or excitement. But repetition changes meaning. When requests become insistence, and when boundaries are questioned rather than respected, discomfort grows. For Ubby and Brittany, privacy had always been a form of safety. Sharing only what they chose had helped them maintain control in a world that often tried to take it away. Another subtle shift appeared in the way Josh interacted with each sister. Compliments began to focus more exclusively on Ubby, unintentionally or not creating emotional imbalance. For two women who had never experienced separation, this felt strange and unsettling. Brittany sensed something she couldn't ignore, a quiet attempt to emotionally isolate Ubby, even if it wasn't openly stated. Ubby, torn between love and loyalty, struggled to reconcile those feelings. The idea that someone might want one sister without fully respecting the other felt fundamentally wrong, yet difficult to confront. When Ubby and Josh married in November 2021, it wasn't meant to be a public statement. It was a personal decision made quietly, with family understanding the arrangement as they always had. Ubby was married. Brittany continued living her life alongside her sister. For them, it didn't feel revolutionary. It felt like another step in adulthood. But the secrecy surrounding the marriage wasn't just about privacy. It was also about uncertainty. When things don't feel fully settled, people hesitate to share them with the world. As time passed, friends began to notice tension. Josh sometimes spoke for Ubby, corrected her, or dismissed Brittany's concerns with a tone that felt patronizing. None of it was explosive. None of it would have made headlines on its own. But for those closest to the twins, it raised quiet red flags. Healthy relationships don't require silencing others. They don't require control disguised as protection. And they don't demand emotional access without mutual comfort. Conversations also began drifting into areas that felt invasive. Questions about intimacy and personal boundaries crossed lines the twins had never allowed anyone else to approach. When they hesitated, Josh framed it as a lack of trust. That framing mattered. Trust should be built, not demanded. For Ubby and Brittany, who had spent a lifetime asserting their autonomy, this felt deeply unsettling. The pressure wasn't physical, it was emotional, and emotional pressure can be just as powerful. The situation became more complicated when legal matters from Josh's past resurfaced publicly. A paternity lawsuit filed by an ex-partner in late 2023 brought renewed attention and stress. While legal processes exist to determine facts, the emotional impact of such situations doesn't disappear with paperwork. The twins found themselves dealing not only with private marital strain, but with the anxiety of potential public scrutiny. Josh appeared more focused on managing perception than addressing the emotional toll it was taking on their household. By winter 2023, the emotional atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Josh's behavior seemed less predictable, alternating between affection and agitation. One evening, a disagreement about privacy escalated into something that felt genuinely frightening to the twins. Voices were raised. Tension filled the room. And more than words, it was his presence, his expression, and his tone that triggered alarm. Brittany later described the moment as one where instinct took over. Something felt unsafe. That night marked a turning point. After Josh left, Ubby and Brittany reached out to close friends and shared what they had been holding in for months. Saying it out loud changed everything. When trusted people reflect your fears back to you without judgment, clarity begins to form. Their friends didn't dramatize the situation. They didn't jump to conclusions. They simply named what the twins were experiencing. This no longer felt healthy. Creating distance was not simple. Being conjoined means every decision requires coordination, patience, and care. Emotional separation doesn't happen overnight. As the twins pulled back, Josh pushed harder, sending frequent messages and demanding reassurance. He blamed rumors, stress, and misunderstandings. But the twins knew their discomfort had begun long before the internet became involved. That distinction mattered deeply to them. When the marriage became public in early 2024, online reactions were intense and often cruel. Strangers speculated, judged, and projected their own narratives onto people they had never met. Some questions were inappropriate. Others were outright invasive. None of it accounted for the emotional complexity of the situation. Ubby and Brittany didn't engage directly. Their brief social media responses were not dismissive. They were protective. Later public suttongs, including photos that sparked new speculation, only added fuel to online theories. The twins chose silence, not because they had something to hide, but because they were prioritizing healing. Silence can be an act of self-preservation. Not every truth needs to be explained to everyone. By mid-2024, Ubby and Brittany appeared more grounded. They focused on their work, their friendships, and rebuilding emotional stability. Whatever the final outcome of the marriage, they had reclaimed their sense of agency. They spoke indirectly about boundaries and listening to intuition, offering lessons without details. In the end, the most important truth is simple. Ubby and Brittany are not symbols, stories, or mysteries. They are people. Their choices, their fears, and their growth deserve respect. Whether they were protecting privacy or protecting themselves may never be fully known. But perhaps the real answer is both.